They called him Pharaoh, Lord of Egypt, master of the Nile, and ruler of men. To his people he was not only king, but a god who claimed the heavens and the earth bent to his will. He built palaces of gold that reached toward the sky, and armies so vast that they shook the ground when they marched. His throne towered above all others, and his word was law. Yet for all his power, there was one thing Pharaoh could not silence: a whisper of prophecy, a murmur carried in secret that one child, born not of his own people but from the Israelites he enslaved, would rise against him. This whisper grew into fear, and from fear came blood. Pharaoh swore to crush this prophecy before it could ever take shape, and with that vow began one of the darkest chapters in the history of Egypt. The land of Egypt at that time was a marvel to behold. The Nile's waters split the desert, feeding the fields that produced wheat, barley, and every kind of fruit. The people lived in cities adorned with pillars and carvings that spoke of their kings, while statues of their king stood silent in every corner. Pharaoh sat above it all, clothed in silk, his brow adorned with jewels, his voice echoing through vast halls where even the walls seemed to bow to his arrogance. He was not content with being a ruler of men. He demanded to be worshipped as the ruler of heaven and earth. When he entered his court, the priests declared him divine, and the people, out of fear, lowered their heads to the ground. But beneath this glittering empire, a people groaned in silence. They were the Israelites, children of Yaqub, descendants of prophets, who once lived with honor, but now were crushed under Pharaoh's chains. Their back bent under forced labor, building palaces and monuments that were never theirs to own. Whips cracked upon their shoulders, and their cries were swallowed by the indifference of the Egyptians. They prayed to the God of their fathers, the one true God, for deliverance, but their cries seemed unanswered as Pharaoh's shadow loomed ever larger. It was in this atmosphere of tyranny that Pharaoh's heart was troubled. Dreams and whispers haunted his nights. His advisors, skilled in the art of interpreting omens, told him of a vision. From among the Israelites, a boy would be born, a boy destined to overthrow his throne and end his reign. The moment Pharaoh heard it, his arrogance was pierced with terror. The thought of losing his crown, of bending his neck to another, was unbearable. He who claimed to be a guide trembled at the possibility that an unseen will could undo him. Pharaoh was not a man who tolerated fear. To crush it, he turned outward, and his fear became the fear of his people. He gathered his council and declared a decree that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it. Every newborn male of the Israelites must be put to death. The order was merciless and absolute. Soldiers stormed the homes of the weak and poor, searching every cradle, tearing infants from the arms of their mothers. The streets of Egypt, once filled with the sounds of trade and laughter, now echoed with the wails of grieving women and the cries of children silenced too soon. The blood of innocents stained the sands, but Pharaoh's heart remained unmoved. He told himself this was power, this was control, this was how he would secure his throne. The Egyptians, fearful of his wrath, turned away from the horror, while the Israelites could only bury their sons in silence, praying that Allah's promise of deliverance was near. Yet Pharaoh, for all his cruelty, could not escape the truth that no amount of bloodshed could change the decree of the Almighty. He imagined himself as a god who controlled life and death, but his fear betrayed him, for a true God does not fear. Night after night, Pharaoh lay upon his gilded bed, restless. The words of the prophecy gnawed at him. He had silenced countless cries, but the whisper of destiny would not be silenced. He convinced himself that he had done enough, that he had drowned the threat in blood. Yet somewhere in the darkness of Egypt, beyond his reach, destiny was stirring. A child had not yet been born, a child who would grow under his very nose. raised by his own wealth, sheltered by his own palace. And one day, by the will of Allah, that very child would stand before him, fearless, carrying not a sword, but the truth. The decree of Pharaoh spread like fire through the land, a command etched in fear and carried out with merciless precision. His soldiers moved from house to house among the Israelites, and kicking down doors, ransacking dwellings, and pulling infants from their mothers' trembling arms. The wails of the people rose into the night sky, cries so heavy they seemed to bend the stars above. Egypt, once proud of its civilization, became a land of mourning. Each morning began with blood, and each night ended with silence, as if grief itself hung over the land like a shroud. Pharaoh believed that by slaughtering the sons of the Israelites, he could silence destiny, but in truth, he only fulfilled it. Women hid their pregnancies, praying that the child within them would not be male, for a boy meant certain death. Mothers smothered their sobs, rocking their infants in the darkness, hoping the soldiers would pass them by. Fathers tried to fight, but their strength was nothing against armed men who carried the seal of Pharaoh. Countless sons were buried before they could even open their eyes to the world, and the pain of it all weighed heavily on the enslaved nation. It seemed to them that the heavens had closed and that their cries would never be answered. Yet in the unseen realm, Allah was preparing what no tyrant could prevent. It was in this climate of fear that a woman gave birth to a child unlike any she had seen. His eyes glimmered with innocence, and his very presence filled her with both love and terror. For she knew Pharaoh's decree, and she knew that his men would soon hear of this birth. Her heart raced with despair. How could she protect him when soldiers roamed every corner? How could she hide him when Pharaoh's spies were everywhere? At that moment of helplessness, the mercy of Allah descended upon her heart. Inspiration came, not from her own mind, but as a whisper of divine guidance. Nurse him, and when you fear for him, place him into the river. Do not fear and do not grieve. We shall return him to you and make him among the messengers. Her heart, though trembling, was strengthened by this promise. Days passed in which she fed and cradled the boy, hiding him from the eyes of Pharaoh's soldiers. Each sound outside her door filled her with dread. Each knock made her think they had come for her son. Yet the promise burned in her chest like a light that would not be extinguished. And when the time came, when hiding him was no longer possible, she placed him gently into a woven basket. Her tears fell upon the reeds as she covered him, her arms shaking as she carried him to the Nile. The river's waters shimmered under the sun, wide and endless, but she trusted the one who had commanded her. With a prayer and a sob, she set the basket upon the current. The river carried her son away, as if guided by unseen hands, and her heart broke with both grief and hope. The Nile wound its way past villages and gardens, past fishermen and traders, carrying the infant toward a destiny that no one could foresee. By decree of Allah, the basket drifted not to strangers, not to danger, but into the gardens of Pharaoh himself. The royal palace, towering in splendor along the riverbank, was the very place the child should have been most vulnerable, but it became his refuge. Servants discovered the basket among the reeds and brought it into the presence of Pharaoh's wife, Asiya. Asiya was unlike her husband. Where Pharaoh's heart was hard with arrogance, hers was soft with compassion. When she looked into the basket and saw the baby's face, something stirred within her. A maternal love so powerful it dissolved all fear. She lifted him into her arms, and her heart whispered that this child was no ordinary boy. Pharaoh's eyes narrowed when he saw the infant, suspicion rising in his chest. But Asiya's voice was gentle and firm. "He will be a joy to my eye and to yours," she said. "Do not kill him. Perhaps he will benefit us, or we will adopt him as a son." Her words calmed the fire in Pharaoh's chest. He relented, not realizing the irony of his decision. The very child whose birth he had tried to prevent was now being raised in his palace, clothed in his silks, fed from his table, and guarded by his soldiers. Allah had turned Pharaoh's plan against him with a single twist of destiny, leaving him blind to the truth unfolding before his eyes. But Allah's wisdom went further still. The infant refused to drink from any of the wet nurses brought to him in the palace. The child cried, his lips rejecting the milk of every woman, and confusion spread among the servants. They searched desperately for someone who could feed him, fearing Pharaoh's wrath should the boy perish under their care. It was then that the child's sister, who had secretly followed the basket along the riverbank, stepped forward with boldness. "Shall I guide you to a woman who will care for him and be sincere?" she asked. Permission was granted, and the woman she led them to was none other than the child's own mother. She had wept as she placed him in the river, but now she held him again in her arms, safe and alive, and none knew her true identity. The boy suckled immediately, and the servants were overjoyed. Pharaoh's court agreed to pay her to nurse the child, and so by the design of Allah, the mother who feared losing her son was reunited with him, protected by the very man who had sworn to kill him. The years passed, and the boy grew into youth within Pharaoh's household. The palace, with its marble columns and golden halls, became his home. He learned the language of the Egyptians, studied their arts, and walked among their nobles. Yet though he wore their garments and ate their food, his heart was different. He carried within him the legacy of his people, a deep sense of justice planted by his mother's whispers of truth. The Israelites remained in chains, their cries echoing through the land, and he felt their pain as though it were his own. The boy became known for his strength, his noble bearing, and his keen mind. Servants admired him, nobles envied him, and Pharaoh tolerated him, unaware of the destiny that grew with each passing day. His name was Musa. In his veins ran not the arrogance of kings, but the fire of prophets, though neither he nor those around him yet understood it. But destiny is patient, and its hour always arrives. For now, the palace was his shelter, and Pharaoh his unknowing guardian. One day, as Musa walked through the streets of Egypt, he came upon a scene that would change the course of his life. An Israelite, one of his own people, was being beaten mercilessly by an Egyptian soldier. Rage surged within him at the injustice, and he stepped forward. In a moment of strength and anger, Musa struck the soldier with his fist. The blow, meant to defend, became fatal. The man collapsed lifeless to the ground. Musa froze, his breath caught in his throat, staring at what his hands had done. His heart filled with regret. He turned his face to Allah and whispered a prayer for forgiveness, and Allah forgave him, for Musa was sincere. But whispers spread quickly through the streets, and soon the incident reached Pharaoh's ears. The next day, as Musa walked, a man rushed to him in haste, whispering with urgency, "O Musa, the chiefs are plotting to kill you. Leave at once, for I am to you a sincere advisor." Fear gripped him, but trust in Allah carried his feet. Musa fled Egypt, leaving behind the palace that had raised him, the land that had sheltered him, and the life he had known. Alone, hunted, and uncertain of his future, he disappeared into the wilderness, guided not by maps or stars, but by the unseen will of his Lord. The desert winds carried Musa far from the land he had known, his steps heavy with the weight of exile. Behind him lay the palace where he had been raised, the people among whom he had lived, and the mistake that forced him to flee. He was no longer a prince of Egypt, nor yet the prophet he was destined to become. He was a fugitive, a man without home or protection, guided only by his faith in Allah. The world stretched before him, vast and merciless, But within his heart there was a flame that could not be extinguished. As he fled deeper into the barren land, Musa's mind replayed the moment of the Egyptian's death. The image haunted him, and the regret weighed heavily on his soul. He had not intended to kill, only to defend, yet the blow of his hand had ended a life. In that act, he had revealed not only his strength, but the responsibility that came with it. Musa cried out in solitude, asking Allah for forgiveness, and forgiveness was granted to him, for Allah is most merciful. But Musa's journey had only just begun, and exile was not a punishment, it was preparation. The roads of Egypt gave way to rocky paths and shifting sands. Musa walked until his legs trembled, until thirst cracked his lips and hunger clawed at his stomach. He carried no provisions, no caravan, no servants to ease his burden. Each night he lay beneath the canopy of stars, listening to the desert winds, finding comfort only in the remembrance of his Lord. Days turned into weeks as he journeyed farther from the reach of Pharaoh. His destination was unknown, but his steps carried him closer to the land that Allah had written for him. At last, weary and worn, he arrived at the land of Midian. There, at the edge of the town, he found a well where shepherds had gathered to water their flocks. Men crowded around the mouth of the well, their animals jostling and bleating as they fought for water. Among them, Musa noticed two young women standing apart, holding back their sheep, unable to approach. Their faces carry both determination and struggle, for they were trying to do a task that others would not let them complete. Musa's heart, always sensitive to injustice, stirred within him. He approached them and asked gently, "What is the matter with you?" The woman replied, "We cannot water our flock until the shepherds move away, and our father is an old man." Musa looked at the scene, the crowd of men jealously guarding their place at the well, and then at the two women whose modesty and duty forced them to wait. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. With the strength Allah had blessed him with, he moved aside the shepherds, lowered the bucket into the well, and drew enough water to satisfy their flock. His act was not for reward, not for recognition, but simply for justice and compassion. When the animals had drunk their fill, he stepped back, allowing the women to return home with their sheep. Exhaustion overcame him, and Musa sat in the shade nearby, his back against the trunk of a tree. In his heart, he whispered a prayer that echoed with both humility and trust. "My Lord, truly I am in need of whatever good you might send down to me." It was a prayer of a man stripped of all worldly power, one who had nothing but faith, and such prayers never go unanswered. Later, one of the two women returned, walking with shyness, her steps modest yet purposeful. She said, "My father invites you so that he may reward you for watering our flock." Musa, though weary, followed her to the house of her father. There he found an old man, wise and kind, who welcomed him warmly. This man, as scholars have said, was Prophet Shu'aib, a man of righteousness whose people had long known his wisdom. Shu'aib listened to Musa's story of his life in Pharaoh's palace, of his defense of the oppressed, of his exile into the desert. The old prophet's eyes reflected both compassion and recognition, for he saw in Musa the strength and sincerity of a man destined for greatness. "Do not fear," Shu'aib reassured him. "You have escaped from the wrongdoing people." In the days that followed, Shu'aib offered Musa not only safety, but also a future. One of his daughters, recognizing Musa's strength and trustworthiness, suggested to her father, "Oh, my father, hire him. Indeed, the best one you can hire is the strong and the trustworthy." Shu'aib smiled and proposed to Musa that he marry one of his daughters in exchange for serving him for 8 years, and if Musa wished, 10. Musa accepted, and thus, after years of uncertainty and danger, he found both a family and a purpose in the land of Midian. Time passed, and Musa lived humbly, no longer a prince but a shepherd. He learned patience in the quiet of the fields, guiding his flock across hills and valleys, protecting them from harm, providing for them with gentleness. In the solitude of shepherding, he was trained for the greater task that lay ahead, the leadership of a people. The life of the palace had been one of privilege, but the life of the shepherd taught him humility, endurance, and care. One night after completing his term with Shu'aib and setting out with his family, Musa wandered through the desert once more. The cold of the night bit at his skin, and the darkness stretched endlessly. It was then that he saw upon the slope of Mount Sinai a fire burning brightly. To his family he said, "Wait here. I have seen a fire. Perhaps I can bring you some news or a burning torch so that you may warm yourselves." He climbed toward the glow, unaware that what awaited him was not fire but light, unlike any he had ever known. As he approached, a voice called out to him from the sacred valley of Tuwa, "O Musa, indeed I am Allah, the Lord of the worlds." Musa fell to the ground in awe, his heart pounding with both fear and wonder. He was commanded to remove his sandals, for he was standing in a holy place. Allah spoke to him directly, granting him a mission that would define the rest of his life. "Worship me and establish prayer for my remembrance. The hour is coming, I almost conceal it, so that every soul may be recompensed according to its efforts." "And what is that in your right hand, O Musa?" Musa replied, "It is my staff. I lean upon it, I bring down leaves for my sheep, and I have other uses for it." Allah said, "Throw it down, O Musa." When he cast it, the staff became a serpent, slithering swiftly across the ground. Musa turned in fear, but Allah reassured him, "Seize it and fear not. We will return it to its former state." Musa picked it up, and it was restored to his staff. Then Allah commanded him to place his hand into his cloak, and when he drew it out, it shone with a brilliant light, a miracle for all to see. These were signs given to Musa, signs that would strengthen him in the face of Pharaoh. For Allah said to him, "Go to Pharaoh, for indeed he has transgressed." Musa trembled at the enormity of the task. Pharaoh, the tyrant whose cruelty he had witnessed, the man he had fled in fear, now stood as his mission. Musa prayed, "My Lord, expand for me my chest, ease for me my task, untie the knot from my tongue so that they may understand my speech, and appoint for me a minister from my family, Harun, my brother." Allah accepted his prayer, granting him strength and the companionship of his brother Harun. Musa descended the mountain transformed, no longer a fugitive but a prophet, carrying the words of Allah and the signs of truth. The shepherd who had once fled into the desert was now commanded to walk back into the heart of tyranny, to stand before Pharaoh, and to declare the message that would shake empires and free nations. The river Nile glistened under the Egyptian sun as Musa and his brother Harun made their way into the heart of Pharaoh's empire. The streets of the great city bustled with life, but there was an undercurrent of fear in the air, for the people lived under the shadow of a ruler who declared himself divine. Musa walked steadily, his staff in hand, each step a reminder of the mission that Allah had entrusted to him. Harun walked beside him, his tongue eloquent, prepared to speak on behalf of his brother, when the knot of hesitation bound Musa's words. Together, they carried not only the message of truth, but also the burden of confronting one of the most arrogant rulers in history. When they finally stood before Pharaoh in his towering palace, the air grew heavy with tension. The guards looked upon them with disdain, while Pharaoh himself reclined upon his throne, surrounded by courtiers and ministers who fed his pride. The memory of Musa was still present in Pharaoh's mind. the boy who had once been raised in his house, the fugitive who had slain an Egyptian. Now he returned not as a servant or subject, but as a messenger declaring a command that no ruler had ever been asked to obey. With calm resolve, Musa spoke the words Allah had taught him. Indeed, we are messengers of the Lord of the worlds. Send with us the children of Israel, and do not torment them. We have come to you with a sign from your Lord, and peace will be upon whoever follows the guidance. Pharaoh's eyes narrowed, his arrogance swelling as he leaned forward. Did we not raise you among us as a child? Did you not stay with us for years of your life? And then you committed that deed you committed, and you are of the ungrateful. His words dripped with accusation, as if to strip Musa of the authority he had been granted. Musa replied with honesty, neither hiding his past nor denying his weakness. I did it then, when I was astray. So I fled from you when I feared you. But my Lord granted me judgment and made me of the messengers. And is that a favor of which you remind me, that you enslaved the children of Israel? His voice rose with strength, shifting the focus back to Pharaoh's oppression, exposing the tyranny that had been cloaked in grandeur. Pharaoh's pride would not allow him to submit. And what is the Lord of the worlds? He demanded mockingly, his court erupting in murmurs at the boldness of Musa's claim. Musa answered with certainty, the Lord of the heavens and the earth and whatever is between them, if you should be convinced. Still Pharaoh sneered, turning to his court for approval. Do you not hear what he says? But Musa remained unshaken. Your Lord and the Lord of your forefathers. Pharaoh's voice grew harsher. Indeed, your messenger who has been sent to you is mad. Yet again Musa stood firm. The Lord of the east and the west and whatever is between them, if you reason. Unable to defeat Musa with words, Pharaoh resorted to threats. If you take a god other than me, I will surely place you among the imprisoned. Musa then revealed the sign entrusted to him. He cast down his staff, and before the eyes of Pharaoh and his court, it transformed into a great serpent, slithering across the floor with life and power. The courtiers gasped in fear. Then Musa drew forth his hand, and it shone with a dazzling brilliance that no eye could ignore. These were not tricks of magic, but clear signs from the Lord of the worlds. Pharaoh's pride trembled, but he quickly cloaked his fear with deceit. This is nothing but magic. He wants to drive you out of your land with his sorcery. So what do you command? His ministers advised him to gather the greatest magicians of Egypt to defeat Musa and expose him as a fraud before the people. Pharaoh agreed and proclaimed that a grand contest would be held, drawing the eyes of the nation. On the day appointed, crowds filled the city, streaming toward the place where the contest would be held. Pharaoh's magicians arrived with confidence, their reputations unmatched, their skills feared. They came forward, asking Pharaoh for reward. Indeed, for us is a reward if we are the victors. Pharaoh promised them wealth and honor, binding their loyalty to his throne. When they faced Musa, the magicians spoke. O Musa, will you throw first, or shall we be the ones to throw? Musa answered, throw. They cast their ropes and staffs, and suddenly it appeared to the eyes of the people as if snakes slithered across the ground. The crowd gasped in awe, convinced of the magician's power. But Musa's heart remained steady, for Allah had reassured him, do not fear. Indeed, it is you who will prevail. Musa threw down his staff, and by the will of Allah, it became a serpent that swallowed up the illusions of the magicians. The ropes and staffs vanished within its jaws, and the truth became clear. The magicians, masters of deception, knew instantly that this was no trick, no spell of human hands. They fell to the ground in prostration, declaring, we have believed in the Lord of Musa and Harun. Pharaoh's face twisted with rage, for his plan had been overturned. His magicians, instead of defending him, had exposed his falsehood. You believed in him before I gave you permission? He must be your master who taught you magic. I will surely cut off your hands and feet on opposite sides, and I will crucify you on the trunks of palm trees. And you will know which of us is more severe in punishment and more lasting. But the magicians, now illuminated with faith, replied with unshakable courage, we will never prefer you over what has come to us of clear proofs and over him who created us. So decree whatever you decree. You can only decree for this worldly life. Indeed, we have believed in our Lord that he may forgive us our sins and what you compelled us to do of magic. And Allah is better and more lasting. Pharaoh's wrath only deepened and his tyranny grew harsher. He turned his vengeance upon the children of Israel, intensifying their suffering, hoping to break Musa's resolve. Yet Musa continued to call his people to patience, reminding them of Allah's promise. Signs continued to descend upon Egypt: floods, locusts, lice, frogs, and blood. Plagues that struck Pharaoh's people but spared the children of Israel. Each time Pharaoh pleaded with Musa to ask his Lord to remove the punishment, promising to release the Israelites. But each time, once the suffering was lifted, he returned to his arrogance. At last, Allah commanded Musa to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. By night they departed, thousands upon thousands, moving swiftly toward the sea. When Pharaoh learned of their escape, he gathered his army, his chariots thundering across the desert in pursuit. The Israelites reached the shore, their hearts trembling as they saw the vast waters before them and Pharaoh's army closing in behind. Fear spread among them. Indeed, we are to be overtaken. But Musa, with unwavering faith, declared, no. Indeed, with me is my Lord. He will guide me. Allah commanded him to strike the sea with his staff. He raised it high and brought it down, and the waters parted by the command of the Almighty, rising into towering walls with a dry path stretching between them. The children of Israel surged forward, crossing the seabed as the waves stood still. Pharaoh and his army followed, blinded by arrogance, charging into the very path that was a miracle for Musa's people. When the last of the Israelites had crossed, Allah commanded the sea to return to its state. The waters crashed down with fury, engulfing Pharaoh and his soldiers. In the final moments, as the waves swallowed him, Pharaoh cried out, I believe that there is no deity except that in whom the children of Israel believe, and I am of the Muslims. But it was too late. The angel of death took his soul, and Allah declared, now, and you had disobeyed before and were of the corrupters. So today we will save you in body that you may be a sign for those after you. His corpse would be preserved, a testimony of Allah's justice, a lesson for all generations to come. Musa and the children of Israel stood on the shore, the waves crashing before them, their enemy defeated. The sea that had once been their barrier had become their salvation, while for Pharaoh it was the place of his destruction. The people, weary yet free, looked to Musa, who reminded them that their journey had only begun. For Allah had promised them not merely escape, but guidance, law, and destiny. The night after the sea had closed upon Pharaoh was filled with silence, a silence that carried both relief and uncertainty. The children of Israel stood on the far shore, the waves gently lapping at their feet, the stars glittering above. They were free for the first time in generations, no longer bound by Pharaoh's chains, no longer crushed under the whips of their masters. Yet freedom was strange to them, almost frightening, for they had known nothing but slavery. Their hearts trembled between gratitude and fear, between faith in Allah's promise and the longing for the security of old habits. Musa stood before them, his staff still in hand, his face reflecting the weight of leadership. He had seen with his own eyes the drowning of Pharaoh, the tyrant who had once claimed to be a god. He had heard his people cry out in despair, and he had watched Allah split the sea to deliver them. But Musa also knew that this was not the end of their journey. It was only the beginning. Freedom was not merely escape, it was responsibility, a covenant with Allah. They set out into the wilderness, guided by the pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night, signs of Allah's presence that comforted the weary travelers. Food and water became scarce, and the people complained bitterly. They cried out to Musa, "Why have you brought us into this desert? Was it only to perish here?" Musa, patient but firm, reminded them to trust in Allah. Soon manna descended upon them, a sweet sustenance from the heavens, and quails were provided for their meat. Streams gushed forth when Musa struck the rock with his staff, water flowing to quench their thirst. Yet despite these miracles, many hearts remained restless. They longed for the life they had left behind, even with its chains, for familiarity was more comforting to them than the unknown. Musa bore their complaints with steadfastness, though often he retreated in prayer, pleading with Allah for patience and guidance. One day as they journeyed, the people passed by a nation devoted to idols. The sight stirred something within them, and they turned to Musa, saying, "O Musa, make for us a god just as they have gods." Musa's heart burned with anger at their ignorance. "Indeed, you are a people behaving ignorantly," he rebuked them. "Shall I seek for you a god other than Allah, while he has preferred you over all peoples?" But this weakness revealed how deep their enslavement had been, not just of their bodies, but of their souls. When they finally reached the shadow of Mount Sinai, Musa was called by Allah to ascend the mountain and receive his commands. He instructed his people to wait for his return, appointing his brother Harun as their guardian in his absence. Then Musa climbed alone into the mountain's heights, shrouded by cloud and thunder, until he stood in the presence of his Lord. There Allah spoke to him directly, a gift given to no one else in that manner. The mountain trembled with the weight of revelation, and Musa, though strong, fell upon the ground in awe. He was given the tablets inscribed with guidance and law, a covenant for his people. These were not mere rules. They were a path to purify their hearts, to live in justice, and to honor the one who had saved them. But while Musa communed with his Lord, a great trial was unfolding below. Among the children of Israel was a man named Samiri, whose heart was crooked, though his tongue was clever. Seizing upon the people's impatience and longing for a visible God, he gathered their gold ornaments and fashioned from them the image of a calf. With cunning deceit, he cast it in such a way that air passed through it, producing a hollow sound like a lowing voice. The people, weak in faith and yearning for idols, were deceived. They cried out, "This is your God and the God of Musa," but he forgot. Harun stood against them, his voice firm, though his heart grieved. "O my people, you are only being tested by this. Indeed, your Lord is the most merciful, so follow me and obey my command." But they pushed him aside, saying, "We will not cease worshiping it until Musa returns to us." When Musa descended the mountain with the tablets, his face was radiant with the light of revelation. But what met his eyes filled him with fury. The people whom Allah had saved from Pharaoh, whom Allah had blessed with manna, water, and freedom, now stood dancing before a golden calf. In his anger, Musa cast down the tablets, their weight too heavy for a people so light in their faith. He seized his brother by the beard and head, crying out, "O Harun, what prevented you when you saw them going astray from following after me? Did you then disobey my order?" Harun pleaded, "O son of my mother, seize me not by my beard nor by my head. Indeed, I feared that you would say, You have caused division among the children of Israel, and you did not observe my word." Musa's anger turned then to Samiri. "What is your case, O Samiri?" Samiri replied arrogantly, "I perceived what they did not perceive, so I took a handful from the tracks of the messenger and threw it, and thus did my soul entice me." His words revealed his deceit, twisting half-truths into poison. Musa declared, "Go. Indeed, it is decreed for you in this life that you will say, 'No contact.' And indeed, you have an appointment you will not fail to keep. And look at your God to which you remain devoted. We will surely burn it and scatter its ashes into the sea." Musa's wrath burned, but his heart still grieved for his people. He gathered the tablets once more, reminding them of the covenant they had broken. He warned them that repentance was their only path to forgiveness. Those who turned back to Allah were pardoned, but the stain of their betrayal would remain a shadow over their history. The journey continued, the wilderness stretching endlessly before them. Musa led them with patience, though trials met them at every step. Hunger, thirst, enemies, and their own disobedience tested them again and again. They were commanded to enter the holy land promised to them, but fear overcame them. They said, "O Musa, indeed within it is a people of tyrannical strength, and indeed we will never enter it until they leave. So go you and your Lord and fight. Indeed we are remaining right here." Musa's heart ached at their cowardice. He turned to Allah and said, "My Lord, indeed I do not possess power except over myself and my brother, so part us from the defiantly disobedient people." Allah decreed that the land would be forbidden to them for 40 years, and they would wander the desert as a people without home, their hearts tested until a new generation arose. During those years, Musa continued to guide them, teaching, praying, and reminding them of Allah's mercy. He struck the rock to bring forth water. He sought forgiveness when they faltered, and he carried upon him the weight of their endless demands. Once, when they were commanded to slaughter a cow as an act of obedience, they mocked and questioned endlessly, turning a simple command into a trial of faith. Their stubbornness revealed how deep their hearts resisted submission. Yet Musa did not abandon them. Through all their trials, Musa remained the servant of Allah, steadfast and patient, though the burden of his people often weighed upon him like a mountain. He stood as both shepherd and prophet, between a Lord who had honored him with direct speech and a people who tested him with their weakness. His life became a story not only of miracles, but of endurance, of carrying a nation upon his shoulders even when they pulled against him.